Alright, guys, what is up? What is up? I don't even know what to say. I think the last time I posted was about the fires. Maybe a little after. I don't remember, honestly. I haven't really looked, but I kind of crawled under a rock. Like, I was like, it's time for hermit mode. Time to go in my shell. Not only in my shell, but let's dig a hole and bury my head in the sand under a rock. Like, I'm like, I want to be as far removed from everything going on possible. And it's not possible to do that. Like, that's usually kind of almost how I've lived life. It's usually like I stay pretty disconnected. I mean, just because I talk to people, I have a pretty active social life, so it's really hard to not hear anything. Like, I'll get texts from people. Occasionally I'll talk on the phone with people. You know, I'm pretty much almost always living with people, so it's pretty hard, even when I stay like super isolated and I'm just chilling in my room and walking around with my headphones in when I'm out of my room. And then, you know, otherwise it's like it's a little hard to just tune out, I guess, with the fires and stuff. And I guess this is gonna be, it might be a little bit heavy, because I have been recording, you know, I just haven't been posting, because I'm like, every time I record something, I'm like, you know, it has nothing to do with anything. And, you know, in a way, a podcast kind of gives a person a voice. But I'm almost at a point where I'm like, I don't know if I even want to use my voice, you know. I'm not saying I want to quit podcasting or anything like that. That's not the goal. But, you know, I don't want another podcast getting shut down, and I don't want other problems coming my way if I start saying things that I am not supposed to say or not allowed to say. But the censorship in this country is becoming problematic, and maybe it's always been that way. I don't really know. But I guess one of my interests is kind of the silencing of things. Now, I don't really know, like, history super good. I pick and choose at the stuff I want to learn when I'm in the mood to learn it, and then I just kind of move from there. And this is just me freestyling this topic, you know, so I'm going to be all over the place. But, you know, I would say I first noticed this type of censorship sort of stuff. Not that it's never gone on, but I first noticed it more during the pandemic. I'm trying to think if there was any other time before that when it really happened. I mean, like, I always worked kind of like in the field of psych, and so I would say, you know, in that field, you know, there's usually that practice of confidentiality. The only time you're really talking about clients by name is either in like your supervision, where you have like a supervisor who's like a trained person who's licensed to consult with you about like risk situations, or someone who's you know, licensed and appropriate to, you know, make sure that people aren't just like going rogue and like doing whatever the heck they want like in their sessions. Like, they make sure your notes are okay, they make sure there are different people that have different roles. It depends what type of site you're at and stuff. But like, working in psychology, there's always been that kind of like, you kind of learn to keep things to yourself. Like, you vent to your friends at work who know the people, who know the situation. You don't really do it in the work setting, But if you are talking about certain people, even when you go out maybe to tacos and beer or something after a shift, you might just be like, oh, that certain one, that certain person, who keeps getting in trouble for whatever reason. Like, you might have like a phrase or sentence to identify them, but you don't even really name drop. You don't really name drop, and you don't really talk in detail. And you never really ask either. Like, you would never do that. So it's kind of like, that's kind of the only experience I've really had, other than maybe like in religious environments where it's kind of like, maybe if there's some kind of prayer related thing. I didn't grow up Catholic, so there wasn't like that form of like confidentiality with like a priest or something, but it is kind of expected. Like, if you're talking to a pastor or something, they're not really supposed to be like spreading your business all over the place. So I'm kind of aware of like how it works to not really say every single thing that you experience or talk about, even if you're like deeply immersed in it. You can definitely live in a way where it's like you're not talking about certain situations with people who have no business knowing about it, or if you are, it's like so vague that like no one would be able to like identify that person. But I don't think that's the same thing as censorship. It's just like a social way of like just kind of protecting other people's privacy and stuff. And I agree with it. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, especially in professional settings and spiritual settings and stuff like that. Like, I don't think it's okay to be like breaking trust with people especially if it's just like for like gossip's sake. Like, it's one thing if it's like, if there's like a reason. Like, I had an experience before where I had someone who was kind of telling me like, I think they were kind of breaking up with someone, or there was like a breakup going on or something between two people that I knew, and I talked to both of them, but I wasn't, I'm not going to get involved in somebody's relationship like that. But I kind of knew the one person's perspective, and but I was hearing from a different person way more often who kept telling me their perspective on things, and it didn't really seem aligned with the other person's perspective of where they wanted that relationship to go. And I guess they were getting super frustrated with it, to a point where it went beyond frustration. And I was like, I didn't say this to the person, but in my head I was like, I think I need to alert some authorities, security or something, like, because that person was like saying things that I was like, okay, that like crosses a boundary. And it's not like, I mean, any boundary, you wouldn't say it's like too mild or something, but it's like, it would be almost equivalent if somebody was like, well, I'm gonna break into their car and steal their car and like take it for like the weekend and just like store it in my garage for a while. And they didn't say this at all, but it would be almost equivalent to that amount of like, okay, this is kind of like going too far, and it's like, even if they weren't gonna do anything that was gonna like actually like hurt someone, it was still like creepy and odd and not okay. And I was like, well, I can't not alert somebody that this person is that upset about this situation, because I could tell they weren't joking. Like, they were trying to make a plan to like get somebody's attention. And I was just like, I mean, if they don't want to talk to you, just leave it alone. Like, you can't really, I mean, they blocked me after that, and I was just like, whatever. They did me a favor. I was like, I don't have any energy for this anyways. But it was something where I was like, okay, like, I need to kind of tell this person. Like, usually it's like, if people are gonna vent to me, I really don't mind. And I don't, I really don't have much of a desire at all to really be like on the chisme side of things. Like I think it's different. Venting is different from that, you know, from just like openly just like, hey, I need to like tell you some dirt. I know, you know, it's not really like that. Like I feel like if it's not going in a productive direction, we don't need to really talk about it. But like just for a sensational sake, you know. But I don't know, like yeah, I think it's pretty easy to kind of like keep things quiet and not make it, you know, something that it doesn't need to be. But with all this censorship stuff and the silencing of people about stuff, you know, I noticed it during the pandemic when you couldn't say corona or you couldn't say virus or COVID or whatever you couldn't say. And then it just kept getting bad from there. And I don't remember who I was listening to. It was a podcast by, I don't remember. I've listened to a lot of random podcasts lately, but I guess in that podcast they were talking about about the virus and, you know, how things were, you know, like looking back at it now and comparing now to how things were. And I think in that podcast they were saying something along the lines of, I don't want to get this wrong, but like along the lines of that they didn't want the side effects spoken about. I think it was Joe Rogan and Mark Zuckerberg. I think it was that podcast, because that was also very interesting. I found that to be a very interesting conversation. The more recent one from 2025. I think they had talked before too. But oh man, like I was wanting to know a lot of the information that he said. Because I think the last thing I saw with Zuckerberg was maybe not the last thing, but like if you remember when there were those I guess it was like some kind of court situation where I guess the government was kind of cracking down on a lot of the social media platforms. I think it was like TikTok and Meta, Facebook, whatever, Instagram, all that. All of them. I think Snapchat maybe even. But it had like a lot of the head people from each of those platforms just kind of represented, and it looked like a courtroom, but I don't know what you call it. It was some kind of a hearing of some kind where they were being called out for different types of categories of issues, and it's on YouTube. And I think it was in 2024. It wasn't that long ago, but it was near about the time when there was a bunch of stuff going on with Biden, when a lot of that stuff started coming up, and when there were all these like really elderly people like in politics that were just not okay neurologically. I think it was around that time period, and it was something I'd never really known about, but yeah, I heard them talking, and it was, you know, there was some, I don't remember it too well, but there was some racial stuff, like some topics where they were saying, you know, with some of the filters, it kind of encourages some kind of racial kind of, like, you know, people have features like, you know, like flat noses, fuller lips, like different maybe eyes or hair textures and stuff like that. It was addressing certain features with some filters where it was kind of like suggesting that certain people with natural features in certain ways shouldn't have those features. I think it was Black people, black people's features, kind of like encouraging them to like change like the way they look through these filters or something. I can't remember if that's what it was. Don't take my word for anything I say though. Like that's why I try to like talk about, if I can remember, at least the source that I'm getting it from, because you can go back and watch it all for yourself. And I like, my memory is not that great for some things, but I do remember them touching on a lot of stuff that had to do with like protecting children from a lot of different situations. A lot of platforms thankfully are cracking down on that, because it's definitely out of control with, I mean, I don't know how long it's been out of control, but certain things involving children and just like trafficking in general has become a topic that is more like on the surface now. It has been for a while, I guess, but I mean, I when I go to In-N-Out, there's like a sign in the drive-thru that says like something about like trying to help people with trafficking, and like it's getting worse, and you know, there's stuff that involves kids, and it's all kinds of stuff. Like, I'm just like, what is happening? And I can't tell if it's just that we have social media and it's now being used in like the political arena too. Because I feel like maybe it always was, right? Like, weren't people always kind of like talking about stuff? Like, at least on Facebook, people were always talking about stuff. But it really seems, I mean, I guess why I'm mentioning all this is because it really seems like the government's kind of putting pressure on a lot of these platforms. We saw what just happened with the whole TikTok thing, where it's like, let's take it off for like less than 24 hours, and people were like freaking out. And then there's this DeepSense AI. It's kind of interesting. I didn't know this, but I had applied for an internship there, and I don't think I ever heard back or anything, but this was like in 2023. And I'm just trying to like understand, like where this is coming from. Like, why do so many people why do so many people, I guess in politics, they're the ones who want to silence everybody else? Like, we really don't have full access to information. We're living in a world where it's like, not only can you not say what you want, but you also can't get access to information that you want. VPNs are kind of a game changer a little bit, because you can kind of like get around certain things. I think I've talked about this before. There was a documentary out of, I think Canada, but I think it was talking about, no, I think you had to change your VPN to show that your location was in Canada. Then you could get access to this this documentary that was about kind of like, I guess, the first Pride in Alaska or something, or maybe it was somewhere in Canada, but I think it was called something like Two Soft Things and Two Hard Things or something like that. And it was talking about like the history of like sexuality and like gender roles and things in, maybe it was like a lot of different groups of Native peoples up in that area, but I want to say it was Alaska specifically, but I don't know for sure. And I remember hearing about it, and I was like, why can't I find this anywhere? I can't find it anywhere. And then I think somebody said you have to have a VPN that locates you in Canada. And then I just did that and literally just logged onto a site and found it. And I was like, oh, here it is. Like, I had to create a login or something, but it was for some like educational site where you could get access to that documentary. And I was just thinking, like, why as an American am I not allowed to watch this? You know, because I guess it's not like the US, at least at that time, was like super cracking down on like anything LGBT. Like, it wasn't really suppressing that information. So it was just weird to me. I was like, why can't I just find what I want when I want it? You know, it used to be easy to find just like any freaking thing on the internet. And now I have experiences where I'm like, I go on there and I'm like, I almost can't find things that I even found. And I've almost had to resort to like screenshotting things because I'm like, will this even get deleted, you know? Example, I posted, I try to read or watch, messages that people send me if they DM me. And I got a message from a close friend of mine who, me and this person never talk about politics, ever. And lately it's like, we're both just like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? Like, how are you doing kind of thing. Checking in with each other about like political stuff. Like, we never talk about, like, that's not something we talk about. And I've known this person since I was like 16, maybe even younger. Like, because I think I remember them turning 16 and they're a little bit younger than I am. So, I don't know. Like, it's really confusing, but I kind of remember that. And, we go way back. We're really good family friends. And, like, we've never even really talked about politics like that. Like, it's not something we discuss. Like, actually, with most of my friends and family, it's not something we normally discuss. There's probably one person in my life that I usually talk about politics with, and almost everybody else, we just don't talk about it. And I'm like, I can't even tell you how many times I've been talking about politics lately. It's like all I've done this year almost. It's like it just comes out. But and it's fine. Like, it kind of has to. I know a lot of minorities and a lot of people from a lot of different varieties of places and backgrounds and things. It's like all of us are affected by this and freaking out. But they sent me this video about I think it was like about the chicken nuggets at McDonald's. And there was some lady who, it was like a young lady, I think, who has a kid. And she was like very upset that her daughter bit into a McDonald's chicken nugget and there was like a tooth in there. And so I went through the comments and I was like, is this even real? Like, what is this? Like, and I was just like, ew, this is disgusting, but it's also like, disturbing. It was just like the grossest thing. And I think she had I don't think she had the chicken nugget maybe, but it was like a little piece of plastic holding like the tooth in there. And she was super upset that happened. And I'm going through the comments and there's a link that was posted. Somebody was like, check out this link. And it was like a YouTube link. And I was like, okay, check out the link. And it was a YouTube link, but you couldn't really click it. And people were like, you can't click it. And so I was like, well, it has the whole like URL. Like, it's lengthy, but it has the whole URL. So I'm like, let me type it in. And there were two letters that seemed like straight vertical lines, but I noticed one was like slightly taller and the other one was like slightly shorter than like the other letter that was like an F in between them or something like that. So I was like, okay, when I typed it in, I was like, it looks like one is an L and the other one is a capital letter I. And so I typed it in to Instagram, to the, I'm looking at it on my phone and I'm typing it into, where you go to type in a message, the little like message bar, but I wasn't gonna like post it. I was just typing it in, and then I copied and pasted it and put it in the browser, and it linked to YouTube to this weird video. Let me see if I still have it in my history. It was this really weird video that today while I was working out, I listened to the whole stupid thing, and I definitely lost brain cells. I can feel that my brain literally shrunk and shriveled into itself from listening to this stupid video. But basically it's by this what's it called? It says The Whistle Has Been Blown. That's the name of the channel. At this time it has 27k views, 56 minutes 24 seconds. It's called Full Interview Between Rabbi Abraham, I think his name was Finkelstein, Finkelst. That's as far as you can see. It goes ... But I think it's Finkelstein. And it's supposed to be like a pastor and a rabbi talking, and the pastor's asking questions from like a white American male Christian Protestant view, asking this rabbi questions, but it wasn't questions about Judaism. It was kind of questions about more of like the conspiracies that you hear around it. And I was like, what is this? Like, because it was linked to that video with the chicken nugget thing. And I guess somebody, and so then I did post the link because I was like, is this the link? And I was like, I just typed it out, and like, you can't click it. It's not clickable, but you can type it out. And then I explained, just like I said on here, when I was talking on here, podcasting, when I just said, I typed in, is this the right link? I typed in the letter L, and after the letter, like before the letter F, and then after that, the capital letter I. And then it came up with this video that has like, these people talking about like these topics about Judaism or Jewish people, and maybe like the history in the US and some other kind of like controversial topics. But I was like, oh, if I use the word Jew in there, my comment might get deleted. Now, I'm not promoting that kind of video. I'm not saying like, oh, like I agree with this or I want people to like think that way. I thought it was like so outrageous that I was just like, is it supposed to be comedy? Because I really can't tell if it's supposed to be comedy. Like it really feels like, if you've seen that Dave Chappelle skit where he's a black guy where he's blind and tries to join the KKK or something, and it's like a skit. It almost felt like a skit. Like, I'm like, is this guy seriously saying all this stuff? Is he being serious? Or is it like he's just like playing a character that's like, oh yeah, we think like this and we think like that, and we do this at temples and we do this other thing, we're trying to like rule the world and like kill all these people and all. Like, I couldn't tell if it just seemed like it was some kind of like off-color kind of comedy skit. And I was like, what is it? But it's old. It's not like a new video. This is like many years old. And so I don't know. But I listened to the whole thing because I was like, I kind of wanted to listen to it, even though like it's not really something I can promote. But I just said the title of it, so if you want to find it, you can. But it's stuff like that where I'm like, can I write Jew or Judaism? Can I write that in a comment anymore? Associated with that link? Like, I'm not I'm not promoting it. I'm not saying everybody watch this because it's real. I'm not saying like, oh, I agree with this or like I support these ideas. Like, it is very strange ideas. And I just feel like even if everything they were saying in that video was real, even if it all was like completely accurate and there's some weird agenda out there, what am I gonna do about it? You know, like, what can I do? Like, I can't stop it. If there really is some kind of like major worldwide conspiracy, none of us can do anything about it. So it's like, it doesn't really matter anyways if it really exists. Like, we're just gonna have to go through the motions with it all, I think. But I don't really even think it helps to even like think about that. Like, I'd rather think about solutions to things and to try to figure out my own action plans and not like sit around spending all my time blaming other people for things that aren't going right in the world. Like, everything's kind of screwed up, you know. Who cares whose fault it really is? Like, you know, at this point there's people that are against, you know, love and respect, and there are people that, you know, just don't believe in that. You know, it doesn't, I don't, even if it is a whole race or tribe or group of people, which I don't know, I couldn't say. Like, as much as I even study all that kind of stuff, there's so much stuff that I'm like, it's so beyond my understanding. And who's to say that our access to historical information is even accurate anyways? It's like, you know, I mean, it's just such a weird thing. Slightly off topic. I don't even know what the topic is, but like, slightly off topic. I'm not gonna talk way too long about, just give me 1 minute of talking about this. But yeah, slightly off topic. You know, I come from a culture where there's a language that's basically a dying language. And it's kind of interesting how I've seen, even in my lifetime, to where you couldn't even search for like a textbook online on Amazon or anything to learn. I think there was one website once that was just all text, like no flair at all. And it was just like vocabulary terminology, like this word equals that word, like in English versus the other word in another language. And then there was another book that you could get out of like Zimbabwe. You had to go to Zimbabwe's, it wasn't a .com, it was like whatever Zimbabwe's extension was for like Amazon. You could buy a book on there, and now you can find YouTube videos and, you know, a lot of interactive material. So I don't think the language is gonna die. But it's like, even if you think about something like that, it's like, you know, if a language dies and everyone becomes westernized, and then they're like, well, our culture or our area of the world is kind of like not a place where we can really like move up, and people are usually, you know, encouraged to, you know, strongly educate themselves so that they have opportunities to move to like the UK or the US or somewhere else. The expectation is they're going to get educated and then come back and make that country, you know, back to their origin country and make it better. But usually people are like, you know, I don't really want to come back. I've established the whole life in this other place now. I don't want to come back. And so people oftentimes don't come back. And so countries like that, that's not the only, there are multiple countries that kind of use that sort of model. And they kind of try to educate outside. And then, you know, people are like, well, even though I love my culture and I love my country, like, there's nothing for me there. Like, what am I going to go raise my kids, like, in poverty or something? And there's no job opportunities, you know? And so they just kind of move on. And it's like, imagine that. You have a dying language and, you know, you move on, and then give it 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. You know, that culture is just so integrated into everything else. Like, how are you even going to find, you know, religious history information or any kind of history about it? And it's like, you know, I've tried to find, like, I really am into like ancient traditions and ancient like pre-Christian and pre-colonial religion and like spiritual systems and things like that. I kind of like to know about them, but a lot of them are really hard to find. And from that culture specifically that I'm from, it's hard to find that information. Surprisingly, one of my uncles wrote a book, or a thesis or something, so his I think it was his doctoral thesis is kind of going against his own culture, saying it was kind of like, because I think he became a pastor, and he's kind of saying in that Christianity is better than this indigenous religion, for whatever reasons. And so I went to his paper to try to find sources, because I was like, okay, well, he should have cited sources in his references that would show kind of what he's pulling from. And, he didn't really have a lot of references, but I was like, those would have been references that would have been old books that were written probably by British people or Dutch people, but kind of like anthropological type of books about those cultures, and it wouldn't have been probably written by those native groups of people. But I mean, the reason why I'm mentioning all that, why it kind of came to my mind, is because when it comes to even like the internet and stuff, it's like, how long does it take? How many generations does it take before something is just wiped out? Like the Olympics, not all of it is like, remember when you could just watch it? You could just watch it on YouTube. In the past Olympics, you couldn't really watch. And, I wonder how that's even going to go down in history, other than the memes of the bulge guy and the weird Australian B-girl. Other than those weird memes, there were multiple other memes, and like the weird opening ceremony and all these other kind of weird things. But you can't really find it, and they kept taking everything down. People started posting, and they were taking everything down. And it's like, you can't even post. You're not allowed to post certain stuff. You're not allowed. And it's like, there's nothing even wrong with it. There's nothing like wrong with it. Like, they say, oh, copyright restrictions or whatever. But it's like, how come I had to get the Peacock app and pay for that stupid thing so I could watch the Olympics? Like, I don't want Peacock. I have no desire to have that stupid app. Like, it has nothing on there that I have an interest in. But it's like, I didn't want to watch it live. And so I was like, well, let me just get this stupid app so I can watch it when I feel like it during that time. And then they took the stuff off that I wanted. And I can't find it anywhere. I'm like, you can't find the full breakdancing competition anywhere on the internet. You can't even buy it. It doesn't exist anywhere. From what I've seen, you can't even buy a full copy of the 2024 Olympics, France Olympics. You can't purchase it, I don't think. I'm just like, well, why would they do that? My friend told me about the opening ceremony, and we're talking on the phone, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I'll just like look it up on YouTube and just like watch it. We couldn't even watch it, because I had to watch it through a reaction video. And it's like, this stuff is for real. Like, I mean, like, sometimes it's like, maybe it doesn't matter with some stuff, because it's like, okay, it's like games or sports or whatever. But I wonder, though, how much of history goes through this kind of a lens where it just gets like completely changed into some other thing, and then there's no other proof of it. And you would think, okay, internet now is, I mean, yes, there are cultures that don't have it, or groups that choose not to have it, and I'm not knocking that. I'm not saying they should need it. The only time where I think, from what I know about the world, where I think that it's maybe a problem where people don't have the internet, is when it's like a cult practicing some sort of like information control, and they're like, you can't have internet because it gives you access to like all these other things, but then they spin it saying like you'll go to hell, or it's gonna take you like farther away from like your faith or whatever, it's a distraction and you need to only focus on godly things or whatever. And I kind of get that. Like, it's not the best way to, like, spend your mind, all the time. You do have to balance things out. And I do feel like people don't really balance things out, though. Like, I notice even for myself how many hobbies have kind of gone to the wayside just because, I spend a lot more time consuming online content than I do, maybe practicing guitar or writing music, or drawing and painting and stuff like that. Those are things I used to do almost every single day. And now it's like, I'd rather just like stare at a screen and like absorb information. But I also like creating stuff. I mean, podcasting and different website related content that I create, that is a big part of like creative activities for me. But I've definitely noticed how it's changed me, it's like, it's changed my levels of anxiety. It's changed how I engage with other people. It's changed kind of like, I used to kind of do stuff with family where I was like, yeah, let's like watch a game or whatever. But now it's like, well, if I don't really want to watch that game, there's other stuff that I just want to specifically watch by myself. And I don't really even want to invite anyone else to watch it with me. I just want to watch it alone. So, that kind of happens where I'm like, okay, like I don't really want to engage with other people sometimes. But I don't know, it's pretty stressful to think about, how much information gets lost through different forms of censorship, how much we rely on the internet. I was pretty surprised, when they took down in TikTok. I think just the day before I was out, and somebody had mentioned something about how often they're on TikTok, and I was just kind of like, well, I'm not really on it. I mean, I have an account on there, and one of them's for TikTok Shop, and then the other one's for just to see what's on there on occasion. But I don't even keep the app on my phone, and I never keep like a tab open. It's just if somebody sends me something from TikTok to check out, I literally have to download the app every time. It just keeps me off of it. And I did use it for a bit, and then I realized how much anxiety it gave me. I was like, I do not have energy for this. So I just got rid of it as fast as I could. I'm like, run away from that. But guys, this stuff is powerful. The internet is strong. And, the human mind, I don't think can really combat, we've sunken ourselves into a hole, into a place where it's like, we can't really combat this with our natural brains. Like the way that our brains actually process information. I mean, I've rambled so much I can't even get into it on here, but I'd have to take so many different angles and approaches. I think what I kind of know more than anything is auditory and language models. Like that's kind of more, and I don't know anything like very, very recent, but as far as research and stuff is concerned, that's kind of what I would say that I kind of sort of know more than anything else. And even on that level, it's like you can see how the brain gets like affected by that kind of thing, by what you hear, by language, by wording, like how the brain adapts to it as well. Like the brain is very powerful, but like it definitely adapts to things, and it changes, how do I say this? It changes your reality. It changes the way you interact. A simple example that has almost nothing to do with anything. if you've ever met like a brand new person from a place that you've never heard the accent from, and then you're talking to this person and it's a very unfamiliar accent. This has only happened to me like a handful of times, but you're talking to someone and it's like what? Like sometimes they say things and you're like, I've never heard anybody say it that way, but your brain adjusts eventually. Like the more you talk to that person when they're speaking your native language and they're doing it with an accent, your brain eventually adjusts to be able to understand it. But if you go back in your memory, you'll be like, I remember when I first met this person, I couldn't understand a freaking word they said, and it's like, you kind of get used to, like, your brain has to adjust to that kind of thing. But if you just like expand your mind on that kind of idea and think about, how you interact with social media, how automatic things become. Like the other day, this happens to me often. Like the other day, I don't know what, let's say I was in my room, had my phone on, screen on, left my phone on my bed, left the room for a little bit to do, I don't know what, come back, and I'm like, okay, I was going to go on this app. And I'm not really paying attention. And next thing I know, I'm on Instagram, and I'm like, wasn't I going to look for something? Like, I'm scrolling on Instagram. I'm in Instagram and scrolling. And I'm like, wasn't I going to, go on YouTube or something and look up this other thing? And I find myself doing that a lot. It's like, I'll try and go into like an app where I'm like, oh, I need to check my email today. And I go to check my email, and the next thing I know, I forgot I was going to click on email, or I just automatically clicked on YouTube and start scrolling. And I'm like, what am I even looking for? Like, it takes me like a second to be like, what am I doing on here? How did I get on here? What was I even doing? Like, sometimes it takes me a while. I have to like take a second and think and be like, I was just about to do something, and I find that happening to me even when I'm not on my phone or when I'm not online. It's like, I'll leave my room a lot, or I'll leave, the house or whatever. Or even like a to-do list. Like if I don't make like a shopping list nowadays when I go to like pick stuff up, or when I'm running errands, and I'm like, oh, I gotta get these 5 or 6 things. I'm going to this spot, get a couple things, go to this other place, get a couple groceries, get some gas at the gas station, and I'll get home and I'll be like, dang, I forgot I was gonna get a car wash. It's like, stuff like that happens all the time, and it's like, I was not this forgetful before, I wasn't this like, it's something's definitely changed. Maybe it's because I'm older, but I really think it's something that has to do with like the internet and social media and stuff like that, where it's like, I think there is a brain rot. I think there is, a lot of depression and anxiety that comes from being online so much. It's like, most of the jobs I've had in the past few years, have been online, and then if they weren't online, I still had to be online. And if the internet wasn't working, I literally couldn't work. I can't think of the last time I had a job where I could do the job without the internet. Like, we at least used to use our Outlook calendars. It's like, if you don't have your Outlook calendar, we would have clients and we'd just be like, well, first of all, you can't log into the system to like see past notes. You can't see any other past records. You can't open the past records. You can't write in new records. You can't, or notes or anything. You can't update any files. You can't log them in. You can't say that they're in house for services at this point in time. You can't send emails. You can't see the calendars of who's using what therapy room. I mean, there's so much, like, when the computers would go down, when the internet would be down, we just literally couldn't work. If you do food deliveries and stuff like that, you can't do that with no app, with no internet. if you do, what's some other stuff? Like, yeah, pretty much anything, you know? I remember, like, when our server would be messed up, and it's like you have to have all these however many factors authentications, and you can't, you know, get the phone, your work phone, to log in to the freaking email where you kind of verify that you're logged into the other system, and you got to get into the VPN, but you can't connect. And it's like you literally can't even log into your work computer. It's like you can get a certain way, you can get a certain distance, but you can't use Teams. I remember that day when you couldn't use Teams. I think there was a lot of stuff that had to do with like air travel and medical site equipment and technology that you couldn't use, because I can't remember what the company was that went down, but there was one company that like was having issues for like a day or something, and you couldn't use Microsoft or any other thing. And it's like, I think people don't realize how deep we've gotten into this stuff. Like, I guess this is the last part I'll say, but I'm probably going to keep talking about this topic. I just want to break it down. I have a friend that does social media research, and I might look into some of his articles and talk about them in a lot more depth, because it's really a topic that's starting to interest me. The more things are going south, and the more things are going south, and the more things are getting worse, and the more the internet is kind of interfering in our lives in a way where it's like, you know, as I'm recording a podcast talking about the internet, right? But I mean, in a way where it's not going in a good direction. You know, freedom of speech almost doesn't exist. You know, you can't write whatever you want. And I'm not saying like you need to be able to write hate speech and stuff, but it's like, I'm not even talking about that. You can't even write other stuff. There's certain stuff you can't even write about or talk about online. You know, mental health related stuff that you can't say certain words or terms. You know, people start saying stuff like unalive and stuff like that. It's like, you can't even like say what it is. And it's like, people have to create these new words to get around algorithms. I mean, do you realize how powerful an algorithm is? Like, if you do work in, you know, any kind of social media capacity, you know how powerful an algorithm is. It can phase you out. You know, I follow a lot of LGBT content creators, you know, a lot of ethnic minority content creators. It's a known fact that different groups of people's content gets phased out through an algorithm, and you will not get shown that content unless you literally know where to search for it. And sometimes, even when you search, I can't tell you how many times there have been channels that I know exist that you literally cannot search them. You can't search the channel in the YouTube search bar. You have to go and, you know, either copy paste a link or click on a link through someone's Instagram, you know, bio. You know, there are a lot of content creators that I follow that are like that. You can only get to their YouTube through another avenue. You can't go through YouTube to get to their YouTube. If you type it in, it doesn't come up. And I think they're phased out because of their different type of minority status. And this was going on since like at least 2019, 2016, I don't know, 2016, 2019, 2018, like pre-pandemic. And it's gotten worse since then, guys. It's gotten worse since then. And I'm not I'm not talking by some weird conspiracy where it's like, oh, like, here's another person just like yapping away. It's like, I'm literally talking about stuff that I do on a regular basis that's like changing right before my eyes. And, yeah, like, people don't really notice. It's like, I talk about this, you know, I was raised in a culture where I've seen how internet just changed. You know, I was raised in a religious culture where, you know, the Sabbath, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. I'm not preaching. I'm just saying, I'm just explaining how this was as far as like media and entertainment. I literally knew people and had friends that did not watch television at all on the Sabbath. They didn't listen to secular music on the Sabbath. If they were going to watch TV, it had to be the Nature Channel or TBN, which is like the church channel. Or like you watch maybe like a CD, a DVD or VHS. Usually back then it was like a VHS. You could watch like Veggie Tales or like some kind of like nature scenes like that movie Planet Earth or that series Planet Earth might be okay. I don't know though if it talks about evolution. I don't really know if they would approve, but um that's not up to me. But um things about nature, you could watch like the like National Geographic and stuff like that. But you couldn't watch sports, you couldn't watch sitcoms, you couldn't watch pretty much anything that didn't have to do with nature or church. You couldn't really watch it. Or you could watch like movies like Moses or Jesus or whatever, those kind of movies and stuff. Um, but you wouldn't really be allowed to like interact with the TV or radio in any other way. Like you could listen to religious radio or classical music or jazz, kind of like lyricless music. I think jazz, maybe there might have been a controversy about jazz. I don't remember. But you could listen to religious music. And this is just a 24-hour period of time. And I remember friends thinking I was so lucky that my parents were like, oh, you can watch soccer. You can come home after church and watch soccer. And we go after church and like buy Chinese food and like come home and eat it. And like, you know, I had friends that were like, oh, like we only eat leftovers because my parents don't cook, you know, on the Sabbath. And like, so they do like crock pot meals and stuff, which was fine. But like, you know, you're a certain age, you get sick of things. But like, they would be like, oh, like, and you'd go to their house on the Sabbath and it would just be like silent, like no TV, no radio. We were allowed to play outside, but it wasn't competitive sports. You know, you could play, but you couldn't play like competitive sports. You couldn't really play with a lot of toys either. So you could like play with music, like you could hike, take nature walks. But we weren't really allowed to play with like I remember one of my friends, you know, they have video games. We weren't allowed to play video games. We weren't allowed to play soccer or basketball. If we went to the beach, we couldn't go past our knees. You know, you couldn't like go in the water. You could kind of like feel the water and stuff, but you know, once you're swimming, you know, it's considered swimming if you're like up to your waist or whatever. So you couldn't go past your knees, just as a safeguard that you don't go up to your waist. Like some of these stuff, I mean, it's not biblical. Like people are like making it up, but it's like it was just a tradition. And then I remember when, you know, people started having this conversation. You know, back when people used to have dial-up and like a household computer where it's like there was maybe one computer per house, if that. And you'd have like a desktop and it was like bulky. And there was that conversation of like, can you go on the internet on the Sabbath? And, you know, most people back then didn't. I remember when the BlackBerry came in, you know, and the Razor and some of those phones where you kind of had a little bit of internet or like a little bit of ability to kind of like check emails, and people started, you know, you'd see them in church like looking at their phone. And this was back before people used to really text a lot. It was like T9 texting, or maybe you'd have like a sidekick, but not everybody had a sidekick. So usually it was like T9 texting, so people weren't really texting like that. a lot of people I knew didn't talk on the phone on the Sabbath, unless it was like, hey, I'm coming to pick you up kind of thing, but for church. But yeah, people weren't just like having their leisurely week, you know. It was really separated out. So I did get raised around people where that was the case, and they practiced that way for about a 24-hour period, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. They would just shut off everything. And I'm not talking like, okay, you can't run the fan or the heater or like drive or anything like that, but it was like, you're probably not shopping for groceries, you're probably not buying gas, you're not going out for fast food, you're not buying anything, you're not paying for anything, you're not having anybody work for you, you're not going to work yourself, you're not studying, and you're also not interacting with mainstream media. The only media you're interacting with is nature related topics or religious related topics. You were allowed to read books, but they were going to be religious books. You couldn't be just like reading Goosebumps or some kind of like random thing. And I mean, this is only some of the rules, but I mean, like, the reason why I mention it is because, you know, to see that culture change, you know, I literally saw it change in front of my eyes to where it was like almost multiple times a year there'd be a conversation about encouraging people, you know, stay strong in your faith and like make sure you stay separate from some of this stuff and just give God that time for 24 hours and like, you know, replenish your faith during those times, and don't get like too sucked into the media. You know, you can disconnect from like watching basketball or from like watching the news or whatever it is you watch, watching HBO, whatever. Like, you're not watching those kinds of things. And I remember when they started playing like relevant like YouTube videos in church, like on the big screen, they would pick maybe like a clip or something that might be relevant. Or when they started live streaming, I remember when churches started live streaming. I remember when people, like I said, were checking their phones during church. And I also remember when people started going up to the front of the church to do either like a congregational prayer or give a sermon or give some kind of a talk, and they would have notes on their phone or their iPad. That is very common now. That you know, I've seen churches with praise teams where the music team uses digital like an iPad that has the sheet music on it, you know. And it's like, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying like, when I was younger, people wouldn't do that. You had like a freaking hymnal and you'd open the book, like, or at most they'd have like a PowerPoint of like your lyrics on the screen with somebody in the back kind of like controlling it or whatever, you know. People would argue about the drums. Are drums even allowed in church? Certain instruments in some really conservative churches, it's like, if you have to plug it in and it's not acoustic, we can't have it. Like, and now it's like you never really hear these conversations anymore. Everybody's so into like the modern stuff, the technology. I don't know anybody, even the people who I know in that religion who are deep in it, I don't know any of them who don't go on the internet on the Sabbath. These are people that I grew up with that are still hardcore, but I grew up with them and they weren't even allowed to play with like Tonka trucks. That was like a controversy. Can we play with the Tonka trucks or the Hot Wheels? No, we can't play with that. Why? I don't know why. Like, there wasn't like a reason, but it was like not holy enough or something. It was too secular. It's like, how's that too secular? But like, you know, I'm not saying it's wrong to live life like that. I look back at those times and I think about, you know, the times in my life where it actually helped me. I was like, wow, this, like, maybe not the full church experience, but parts of it, you know, just like the practices and the balance of the week of like, okay, you literally shut off and you go socialize and you go out in nature and you're like interacting at a church, and it would be Friday and Saturday and Sunday and you're like doing all these things with people and it's fun. And like, maybe you couldn't do a lot of like watching basketball or like going clubbing and stuff, but you really have these strong like social ties because you weren't distracted by any other thing and you weren't really allowed to go do anything else. So when you were with your friends, you just walked around town, went to the park and sat around at the park, went to someone's house, we all used their bathroom, go over to this other person's house and like walk around their neighborhood, you know. Somebody's parents come and pick you up, and you know, when we got older, we'd just like take naps at the beach and stuff, and it was just like we didn't really do anything, and it was nice, you know, and it was pretty cool. But you know, try and find someone who wants to spend a whole day offline with you, not watching Netflix, not watching YouTube, not doing anything, and you know, just wants to like hang out with just you and them and no other devices around, just catching up. I mean, like, you can't even find that these days. You can't find anybody who would value that hardly at all. And I wonder if that's a problem, you know? Like, to me, it's kind of a problem. You know, it's like, I can't tell you how many people I've met where they just sit on their phones all day, or how many times I've gone out to, like, hang out with, like, I'm not calling out specific friends or family or whatever, but certain friends or family, sometimes, it's not all the time, but certain friends or family on occasion might just like be on their phones all the time or taking phone calls, and it's not even an important phone call, and their like phone is ringing off the hook, and they're getting texts and phone calls, and they're just literally like watching videos, you know, in the middle of dinner, you know. It's like at a restaurant, and like, you know, they're like, I mean, everyone these days, everyone kind of does the quick check, or like, you know, when I go to the bathroom, I'll usually do a quick check, you know, but it's just interesting. I'm like, I've seen this change before my eyes, and, you know, I was raised around people who like would disconnect from things, and I even practiced that, to be honest. At some point in my life, I was like, okay, I want to like do this, and there were multiple years, like, I'm not like tooting my own horn, but I'm just saying, like, there were multiple years where I was like in that lifestyle, but it was easy for me to do because everyone I knew, for the most part, I was part of a whole community of people who lived like that. And so it was like, even if they weren't, you know, if we weren't working or whatever, you know, I remember when certain friends would come over, my parents would know that they weren't allowed to like watch TV. So, you know, their parents would coordinate and be like, oh yeah, like, come over. We'd have like a sleepover. So after church, they'd come over, and then Saturday night, they'd sleep over. And we literally, you know, would take, you know, we would stop watching TV. We'd come home after church. We would probably still buy the food and eat it, you know, after church, like, you know, and offer them the food, and they'd eat it with us and stuff too. But we would usually just do that, and we disconnect, all of us together. We just sit around the house and talk, or like go take walks down to the beach, or like go to the park, or go on all these hikes and stuff. And we do that like almost every Saturday. And maybe there'd be another evening service type of thing, or, you know, sundown comes, we all know exactly, I almost can't stop doing that. Like Friday night and Saturday night, you almost always know the sundown time. And it's just an interesting way to kind of like connect with the moon and the sun and stuff like that. And it's like, you almost always know when sunset is on Friday and Saturday, because Friday sunset starts, and you're like, okay, I gotta shut everything down like at least a little before that, you know, so you're not seeping into that time. And then Saturday night comes, sun goes down on Saturday, and you're like, okay, I can turn everything back on, you know, like first thing you do is like turn on the TV or like whatever. And it's like, is that not an addiction? It's like, dude, it's like, I think we're all addicted. And I don't think I realized it until I tried to kind of like go back to that lifestyle. And I was like, I want to just kind of like disconnect. And I was like, it is hard. It is hard to turn off my phone. I literally, to turn it off for a whole 24 hours, and then also not go on my computer. Like, I've done that. I've been like, okay, I can turn off my phone, but I gotta go on my computer at least. you know, it's like somebody might be trying to contact me. I might need to check my emails. I want to watch, like, most of my entertainment is on my computer. And I'm like, I don't like it though. I don't like it anymore. I don't like it. It doesn't add value to my life. You know, I could be using my brain in so many other ways because I have a brain and I do like to use it. But I mean, I don't know. It's one of my favorite topics though. This is one of my favorite topics, is how the internet in general, how I've seen it as an elder millennial, how I have seen the internet literally shape the culture that I was raised in. Now, I'm not actively participating hardcore in a religion, a mainstream religion. I have values that come from it, sort of, and then things that I'm like, I no longer value this because it's prejudice and it's weird and it's not aligned with my personal values. I don't think is right to treat people in a certain way because they don't believe the same religion or whatever. I kind of backed off from it because of the prejudice that people call spirituality, and it was disguised as something that wasn't prejudice, and people practice so much prejudice that I just couldn't want to call myself a part of that, you know. And so I don't claim it, but I'll be transparent, you know. I've talked about it just a little bit. I still hold a membership at one of these churches. It's an Adventist church. I still hold a membership there. I don't plan on getting rid of my membership there. I also don't plan on going back to the church, but maybe if it's like a Christmas play, or maybe like during Pride, I might go to one of the services like up near, you know, Hollywood, like up there. I like that service because they allow trans people to be members and up on the stage, and they don't discriminate based on a lot of different types of identities and things. Like, they don't discriminate like a lot of other denominations and churches do. So I can appreciate that, and I support it. But I still don't like the whole, like, you need to believe my religion or else you're going to go to hell. I still don't like that mentality, but I do appreciate that church and kind of how they've gone through a lot to try to, you know, hold strong to their beliefs about love and stuff like that. You know, they're kind of like the outcasts of the Adventist world. People don't respect them. There have been a lot of pastors that leave or have been kicked out because of trying to, you know, promote love throughout the city of Los Angeles. But I support it. Like, that's my kind of thing. I'm like, you know, even if I don't like fully believe in like all of this stuff, you know, I still value some of it. I do still value that, you know, tradition of disconnecting from everything and like focusing on deeper things that aren't like Trump or other things. And I'm not saying that stuff isn't important. I'm just saying, you know, it shouldn't be that hard for me to disconnect for 24 hours, but it is. You know, it is hard. And, you know, it is hard to want to just like get out and go do stuff, you know, and just think and be in my mind or interact with people, and use that as a practice. And I'm often going back and forth between like, do I want to bring it back into my life because it brought me so much value? And I'm not trying to promote a religion or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, you know, we should be able to not need to be on the internet every single day of the week. You know, we should be able to be okay to disconnect for 24 hours and not feel like I can't do this, you know, not have that be like the most challenging thing. You know, I remember in college, you know, I really looked forward to the Sabbath because I was like, thank God I don't have to study. You know, it's like, I don't want to do anything today. I'm done. I'm wiped. And we would just mostly play music. We'd write our own music. You know, I was in some bands, and we would literally spend a lot of the Sabbath outside of church. We would write our own music. We would take walks. We would go on hikes. We would go to the beach. You know, we'd talk. We'd catch up. You know, I mean, that kind of stuff is like very valuable, and it's like we almost can't do it anymore because nobody wants to get off of Netflix on the weekend. They just want to sit on the couch and like watch movies. But, you know, and myself included. But I mean, that's another topic when it has to do with the internet. But this is just a general internet episode, I guess. But I don't know. It's kind of a lot of the stuff that's kind of been important to me that has been coming up a lot. That I'm like, I don't know if I like where I see things headed. You know, we're also sucked into this stuff, and we're also dependent on it, and it's also, you know, being tampered with, and we're also being silenced. It's like we're having such a complicated relationship with the internet now that it's kind of scary, you know. It's like I remember when we used to share a household computer and use dial-up, and we couldn't be on the household landline phone at the same time that the dial-up was on. You know, it was a different time. You know, or when you had to keep the phone on the charger, when you had, you know, a couple cordless phones in the house, and then like somebody else would answer the phone, and then you're like, get off the phone, I got it in the other room, you know, and you're just like, are my parents listening? Are they listening on the other line? You know, or you could hear when someone else was on the other line and kind of picked up the line, and you're like, let me go check if I think somebody's listening. You know, it's like, but they would listen to see if you're on the phone. They wouldn't really listen to you. At least I don't think they would. I don't know. But, you know, I don't know. There's a lot of nostalgia attached to those times. But, you know, I think I might revert back to it. I just don't think I could maybe not record podcast episodes, because I really do value doing that. But there is a part of me that I think I'm literally going to have to do something to kind of disconnect myself at least every so often, because it's like when I just don't disconnect myself, I'm literally on the computer, a computer or a device most of the day. It's like I'm either doing it to make money, or I'm doing it to entertain myself, or I'm doing it to fall asleep, or I'm doing it to like veg out, or whatever. It's like, you know, I don't know. Like, all right, well, I gotta actually go to bed because it's late. I'm gonna try to, let's see if I post this before I go to bed. All right, guys, thanks for listening.